Jim, survival is definitely one thing, and we both look at it from different angles. Since I last spoke to you, though, I can honestly say the oil in the transmission's no hotter. So as long as we keep getting rain, and we just got a load of it from that storm, things tend to work out quite good here. But I want to touch one more thing. Would you agree with me, like you did just prior, the second most dangerous thing we all face right now is an ignorant population?
Oh, certainly. Yes. People need to wake up to the realities of the modern milieu. They need to recognize propaganda for what it is. They need to recognize that so-called independent media in our country and elsewhere is actually state-controlled media, and that it's incumbent upon individuals to educate themselves and to filter out the nonsense, because unfortunately, the nonsense is the prevailing view that's being pumped into our brains by television and the internet through the corporate-controlled media.
We're doing our best, but how do you do this? People are afraid to get out of their comfort zone, even the so-called informed. They want to be part of the group. They don't want to be the outsider. They don't want to be in someone's face saying, you need to understand this. How do we do it?
Well, I think it's just a matter of waking people up, alerting people to the presence of the alternative media. A lot of people don't even go beyond the mainstream media plus perhaps, say, the Drudge Report or, say, WorldNet Daily. And those are still they're widely read news services, and they do key into other alternative media. But if you'll notice, most of the links that end up on the Drudge Report end up right back to the mainstream media. So they're like insider outsiders. So it's important that people wake up, alert their friends to all the alternative media that exists. And again, you need to be perceptive and filter out the nonsense, because there's a lot of mediocrity out there, and there's a lot of just plain lies out there, a lot of gray and black propaganda that exists, and people need to be very discerning. There's a lot of alternative websites out there that don't seem to have any discernment at all, and they just throw everything together. You have sites like beforeitsnews.com that throws legitimate news into the mix, along with, gray aliens ate my baby kind of stories.
Yeah.
So, we certainly need to have a higher level of discernment, and I think it may come down to the development of a alternative to the internet as we know it. Because not only is the internet falling under the control of the United Nations, but all of the web search engines seem to be now in cahoots with the mainstream media, pointing everyone back to the mainstream media. So if you go to google.com and type in a search on Hillary Clinton health or Trump corporate interests, you're not going to get what you think you're going to get for responses from that search, because the searches are now all skewed. And people need to be aware that they're being lied to in some very subtle and sophisticated ways.
Yes, these people do know where words originate from, and they definitely use that to their advantage. I'd like to shift briefly, while we still have a bit of time, back into the States and travel back with me just a few decades, Jim. Over 90% of what's considered important, the United States finished first or a very close second. Subjects such as happiness, education, quality of life, rate of infant mortality, all of these America finished first, or like I say, very close second.
Right.
While just doing a bit of research recently, I can't find anything there in the top 10. I mean, they're right now approximately 5% of the population representing, yet consuming close to 70% of the world's antidepressant. The same 5% making up for over 25% of the world's incarcerated. What's going on? They're not, the closest thing I can find is 12th place here, and that's in happiness. Now, I realize that's subjective. What's happy for one is not for another. But talk with me. I mean, I haven't lived there in 4 decades. What the heck is going on?
Well, things are definitely in decline in the United States. I think a lot of it has to do with the scale of government that we've taken on. We've basically especially after 9/11, tacitly agreed to a larger scale of government, greater government intrusiveness in our lives, government scrutiny of every aspect of our lives. We're essentially living now in a surveillance state in the United States. Most Americans don't even realize it, or they'd like to forget about it. They don't want, they have turned themselves into intelligence gathering voters, essentially, for the entire police state. And now they're doing it by way of their cell phones, which are active even when people don't think they're active. Whenever they have a battery in them, they are tracking their users. The NSA is now effectively listening to every conversation. They're all being keyword searched, not just international calls, but all domestic calls. People have cameras built into their laptops, their iPads, their iPhones, even their computer monitors on their desks are constantly filming every American. There are, of course, also countless CCTVs all over, especially in urban areas, that are monitoring every aspect of our lives. And within a few years, that entire network of cameras is going to be key into facial recognition and into license plate scanning. So privacy is just about gone in the United States. Most Americans don't realize it. And we've signed up to this whole level of government, this whole surveillance state, higher taxation, more regulation. Is so incredibly intrusive that it's almost inescapable.
Well, don't they say you get the government you deserve?
Unfortunately, yes, they do, and it's true. And what happened after 9/11 was people gave up their freedom in exchange for security. That's the bottom line.
Well, that's at that point, roughly after 9/11, is when they stopped taking their citizens as fools and started taking them as cowards.
Yes.
You see, that's the point they knew they weren't going to do anything anymore. That's why they don't hide these stage events, these false shootings, these school shootings. They're so blatantly set up, a fool could see that, but they no longer care. If they wanted to make it secretive, I mean, it would be easy for them. They got the resources to do it. But they realize now the citizens are divided, they're conquered, and they're cowards, basically. They're not standing up.
Right.
Honestly, in today's day and age, if your vote really mattered, do you really think you'd be allowed to do so?
I haven't completely given up on the electoral process, but essentially when we're handed candidates who are all hand-selected by the powers that be, and you have your option of pro-big government status candidate A versus pro-big government status candidate B, what real choice do you have?
Well, really, in a country with 330 million people, if that's the best two you can come up with, you're in serious yoga.
You won't have any argument with me on that one, Barry. It does make expatriation look a lot more desirable to people like me. And with the prospect of either Hillary or Trump clamping down on freedom of speech, I think a lot of bloggers will very soon have to make a very tough decision about whether they need to expatriate in order to be able to continue to speak freely.
Well, with our last conversation, remember I was discussing that as one of the three imperative parts of any plan B. Without an escape route, you're a stool with two legs, and you're going to topple. I mean, just check history. You don't have to even accept my philosophy about it. Just check history, and you'll see that's proven correct.
Yes. I do recommend that all of my readers, I've mentioned it several times in my blog, at the very minimum, keep their passports updated. And I've also been talking about hedging into foreign currencies quite a bit recently. I was buying Swiss francs when they cost 77 cents a piece. It now takes $1.03 to buy a Swiss franc. Real bargain in the next few months is going to be the Great Britain pound, which is going to be approaching parity with the U.S. dollar.
Well, even now, Jim, you can't fall off the floor, right? I mean, the pound is an excellent investment even now. As a matter of fact, since Brexit, who's the strongest economy in Europe right now? It's Britain.
Right.
Who's got the lowest unemployment right now? You gotta go to Britain.
Right.
Who is working their butt off because everybody wants to buy when there's blood in the water? They're getting orders for exports like crazy.
Right.
Because of that. People in Western cultures need to really start grasping that the strong dollar is going to be their demise.
Yes. Right now, British textile makers, British car makers, for example, can't even keep up with orders in part because of the weak pound. But I think that in the long term, the pound is going to appreciate versus the dollar and versus gold.
I agree with you on that statement for sure. The other thing is, though, I don't know how many Westerners, by their nature of how they've been taught to save and invest, of course nothing's ever black or white, but various shades of gray. However, with a mere 0.03, that's 0.03 of Americans owning a foreign bank account, I think you're trying to teach a dog a card trick on that one.
Yeah, it is wise for Americans to expatriate some of their funds. Even their physical expatriation is only a remote possibility. It's just common sense to hold at least part of your assets offshore in a foreign currency or precious metals on safe deposit in a foreign country.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, spreading one's portfolio is and these type of questions will warrant maybe another interview in the future. I wanted to close off with something and then hear your thoughts on it. This is a recent article from Dr. Roberts, Paul Craig Roberts. It's titled Post-Armageddon, and I'm quoting him. Americans need to wake up to the dangerous situation that Washington has created, but I doubt they will. Most wars will happen without the public's knowledge until they happen. I and a few others try to alert people to the real threats that they face, but our voices are not loud enough. Not even Vladimir Putin's voice is loud enough. It looks like the West won't hear until there remains nothing at all of German and NATO troops and of Poland and Romania and quite possibly the rest of us. Do you see that attitude changing? I happen to agree with that 100%. It's called the birth chip.
Yeah, I think I've always been a fan of Paul Craig Roberts. I don't always agree with him.
Well, of course.
He's probably one of the greatest minds in international affairs writing today. And I think people should pay attention to what he writes because he's really looking not just at the next election, but at the next generation.
Do you agree, though, where he's going with that statement where the ego's blinded the eyes do you agree with that from what you see living in the States? Do you agree with that?
Yes, yes, I do to an extent. For most Americans tend to be very parochial about things. In fact, the majority of Americans have never traveled overseas. So it's only natural that the American citizenry is not fully appreciated at the Forex or things like the international trade agreements like NAFTA and GATT and the TPP. They're just ignorant of them, and it's not until they cost them personally when they lose their jobs or lose the ability to travel freely, like we lost a few years back with our when passport controls came into effect for travel between the United States and Mexico and Canada, or when they lose the ability to move currency without penalty, or even in some cases it's considered an out-and-out crime to move currencies between countries. In the United States, we still have a window of opportunity that people should take advantage of. When Americans travel overseas, every member of a family can carry up to $10,000 in cash of whatever currency they want with them without any penalty or any taxation. And for now, you can move assets offshore as long as you paid tax on it once. It's your money and you can move it offshore if you'd like. But that window of opportunity may be closing, and Americans need to wake up to that fact.
I want to take my final question. I'm watching the clock and I'm respecting your time that you had available for me. Assuming you're still alive, what are you going to say? What are you going to say to the people, the grandchildren, the children that are still alive when they learn that all of this, if it turns nuclear, was all avoidable? What are people going to say?
Wow. I think that if you look at things from a multi-generational standpoint, it all comes down to the forces of freedom versus the forces of tyranny. And people need to recognize that tyranny can have many faces and fly many flags. And fascist tyranny is just as dangerous as communist tyranny. And right now, America is slipping under the control of corporate fascism.
I'm going to close with this, and then we're going to let our viewers know the easiest way to reach with you, but I'm quoting Mark Passio on something I read a while back, which I think is tremendously important, and that is, no one has the right to be ignorant when it affects other people's freedoms.
That's a good quote.
Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure, a long time, and sometime I want to fill you in about our side of the pond, how things are going. And what's the easiest way to reach out and stay connected with you, Jim?
Sure. My website is survivalblog.com. It's all available free. There is no super secret members only area. The archives are fully searchable. They now date back to, 2005. So we've got 11 years of the blog that's fully searchable, fully available, and there's a wealth of information there on family preparedness primarily, but a lot on a whole range of topics, everything from water filtration and food storage, alternative energy, do-it-yourself medicine, you name it, it's in there. Again, they're all free of charge. I'm not trying to sell anything here. Take advantage of all that information. It's free for the taking. That's survivalblog.com.
Jim Rawles, I want to thank you so much for taking a bit of time to talk with me today, and scut us out on DR Escapes and our new website, somethingfeelswrong.com.
God bless.